Special guest here today. You need to come check out his books over here, which are pretty hilarious. But this is the free market warrior, Loren Spivack here.
Well, thank you guys so much for inviting me. My name is Loren Spivack, and I'm the free market warrior. I travel all over the United States and talk to conservative groups and Republican groups and pretty much anyone who's willing to listen about free market economics, which I think is the secret to America's greatness of the past and is the only way we can reclaim that greatness. Now, I'm probably the only one here today who does not live in Oregon. So I was thinking about what I should talk about, and what I thought I would do is share some of the wisdom that the rest of the country has learned on this topic and bring it to you guys in Oregon, because there's a lot of common experiences that we've had. And the first thing I wanted to share was a question that puzzled me a number of years ago, and that is the federal income tax required a constitutional amendment, which means 2/3 in both houses of Congress plus 3/4 of the state legislature. How did they ever get that kind of popularity for an income tax? I mean, you wouldn't think that would have everybody, running out in the streets to go vote for the income tax. And yet it overwhelmingly passed. And the answer is very simply, they lied. They said that it was only going to apply to rich people over the equivalent of about over $50,000 a year in today's dollars, and it was only going to be 1%. It would be a 1% tax. And then for the super rich, people earning over $1 million a year, and this is in 1913 dollars, when dollars actually bought something. If you earned over $1 million a year, about $20 million today, it would go up to a maximum of 7%. And people say, well, what's wrong with that? You're a multi-millionaire, 7%, what's the problem? So they voted for the tax. Anyone want to guess how long this took? 4 years later, it was applying to every single full-time wage earner in America, and the top rate had gone from 7% to 77% in 4 years. And we see this on other taxes too. The Social Security tax was originally a 1% tax on your income, and it has also gone up 7-fold. So the first thing I want you to understand is whatever rate they're promising you, it's a lie.
It's a lie.
Okay? And we know it's a lie because every other state's gone through the same thing. By my survey of state sales taxes, there's not been a single example of one that was introduced which did not skyrocket in the next few years. Okay? The crisis which will force them to raise this tax rate once it's in, it's the camel's nose under the tent. The crisis that will force them to raise it dramatically is already being planned as we stand here. So that's the first lesson. And then the second lesson is that you're supposed to think of taxes as a kind of a civic good, something that contributes to our society. When Bill Clinton, remember Bill Clinton? When Bill Clinton was president in 1993, he was trying to raise people's taxes, and he said something which fascinated me at the time. He said, those who get more out of society should be obliged to put more back into society. And that's why I'm going to raise their taxes. And I thought this was fascinating. Back at the time, I was looking at that sentence, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Because Bill Clinton is a man who had basically one skill. He was very good at manipulating words to deceive people. And he was able to ride that skill into becoming president of the United States, which is pretty impressive. And I realized that one of his words changes its meaning in the middle of the sentence.
Is?
Did you notice that? No. Well, he's done is too. He's done a lot of words. But this one was society. He's got two different definitions of society, and he switches them in the middle. The first time he says those who get more out of society. What does society mean at that moment?
Rich people.
It means the marketplace. Where do rich people get their money? Where did Bill Gates or Donald Trump, for that matter, get his money in the marketplace? They bought things, sold things, and then the second half of the sentence, he says they need to give more back into society. Now what does it mean? Now it means the federal treasury. Okay? This is a switcheroo that we hear all the time. That because free people make each other wealthier by exchanging goods back and forth, that somehow makes us indebted to the treasury. Well, I don't follow that logic at all. It's ridiculous. The fact is, the immutable fact is, that taxes inevitably, in all cases everywhere, are a penalty for productivity. And the reward from the tax system inevitably goes to people who produce nothing. Okay? That is the iron law of taxation. So there's your second problem. And the third one is that you ought to care about the fiscal stability of your state. I mean, we got to make sure that the state of Oregon doesn't get into economic trouble. But it's a very interesting story when you look around the country. What states are in economic trouble?
Liberal states.
Yeah, you might have noticed that. Well, the worst fiscal state in this country is Illinois. The second worst is Connecticut. The third worst is New Jersey. The fourth worst is California. And they have a bunch of things in common. Yeah, they're all blue states, but I'll tell you something else about them. They all have a really high income tax, and they all also, in addition, have a really high sales tax, over 6%, all of them. And yet they're all in deep, deep fiscal trouble. How do you explain that? Well, and it's particularly interesting to note who's not in fiscal trouble. There's a term that we use in business called best practices, which means that you look at what your other competitors are doing, and if they're doing something that's working, you try to copy that. Now, in politics, they do kind of the opposite. They look for the states that are doing the worst and copy that. But let's look at who's doing the best. Let's look for a minute at the state of New Hampshire, which is a neighboring to my state of Massachusetts. New Hampshire has no income tax at all, none, and no sales tax. They're the only state in the union that has neither one. How are they doing fiscally? They're doing great. Their economy is fine, the state's healthy, no debt. In fact, last year, the state lowered taxes because they lowered the corporate tax. Why did they lower the corporate tax? Because the only tax they've got. They don't have income tax or sales tax to lower. So they've got the corporate tax and they lowered it because they've got more money than they need. Their economy is booming. So we need to understand that when they say that this is the road to fiscal stability, it's nonsense. The truth is, closer than Bill Clinton could have imagined, the truth of economic prosperity is in us. We free people make each other richer, and it's one of the most beautiful things in the entire world. There are three activities that actually make an economy bigger, that expand it. The first one is if you take resources that have not been brought to market and bring them to market. Okay? If you find something that nobody's using and you bring it in and you utilize it, that makes the economy bigger. Okay? The second activity that creates wealth is if you turn something from a less valuable form into a more valuable form. So if I cut down a tree and I turn it into a house, the house is worth more than the tree because I've altered it to a more valuable form. I've again made our economy richer and bigger. And finally, is when you trade, and trade's hard to understand because it seems like things just move back and forth. But trade actually makes everybody richer because in all trade everywhere, things move from where they're less valued to where they're more valued. When the shoemaker and the baker trade, they're both richer, right? Because the baker values the shoes more than the shoemaker, and the shoemaker values the bread more than the baker does. Okay, value's not in the thing, value's in us. And trade makes everybody richer, and that's it. All other economic transactions in the world are what we call parasitic. in that somebody's richer, but somebody's poorer, okay? So like a mugging. If a mugger, puts a gun to your head and says, give me your wallet, that's an economic transaction. But it is not a productive economic transaction. It is a parasitic economic transaction because he's now got more money and you've got less money. The economy didn't get bigger. He just moved from one place to another. And that is, unfortunately, the category which taxation falls into. Because somebody gets the money and somebody loses the money, nothing is being produced. Free people in a free market make each other richer all the time if we would just be left alone. And that is my advice for you guys today. I'll tell you really quickly about my books, which somebody put in front of me. I've got 3 books so far. My first one is a parody history of the Obama years called The New Democrat. It's a parody of The Cat in the Hat with Reid and Pelosi as thing 1 and thing 2. It's the whole story of 8 years of Obama. And Salon.com called it the most twisted piece of conservative propaganda print matter out there. In case you don't think I get good book reviews. And then my second book is called The Gorax. It's a parody of Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, and it's an anti-environmentalist parody. It's about how environmentalists are destroying our country for profit, and it stars Al Gore as the Lorax character. The original title was going to be The State of Oregon. And my most recent book, The Wizard of is basically about the 2016 election done as the Wizard of Oz, with Bill as the wizard, Hillary as the Wicked Witch. There's even a cowardly rhino who suspects that the Democrats are up to no good, but he's scared to do anything about it. If you'd like to check out my books, I have some with me. Thank you so much for letting me share my day with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.